God's never been so good for me. I had to say it. I was going to say, I wasn't going to say that when I got out here. Sometimes I just revert, I still got issues to work on, but I'm liking the odds. I don't believe in impossible. And the reason that I don't believe in impossible is because I have overwhelming evidence that it actually doesn't exist. I was born in rural southern Alberta. Don't have high school. At 26, I was the head of a $3 billion organization that was the cornerstone of what we now know today as the cloud computing industry. At 32, I was at the base of the World Trade Centers wondering why I was alive and so many people weren't. At 35, I was bankrupt. I was a hopeless addict, and I was living on the streets of Vancouver's East End. At 42, I was in a loving relationship, had a daughter on the way. At 42, I was diagnosed with lymphoma cancer. At 45, I founded a company called Earthcast that endeavored to put cameras on satellites in space so that we could all see an unabridged view of the world in 1-meter video resolution. We did it. We put cameras on the International Space Station. And Deloitte & Touche called us the most exciting and important tech company in Canada. At 49, I'm in front of an esteemed audience of people who care about changing the world. That's impossible. It is beyond impossible. We have all faced and experienced impossible in our life. We all have inextricable evidence that impossible does not exist. You have done things, come through things, and overcome things that were not possible to be done. How I stumbled upon my impossible and how to overcome it was quite by luck. It wasn't necessarily good luck, but it was not luck nonetheless. When I was living on the streets of Vancouver, I had one possession left. Fittingly, that one possession was a key. This key was to a Jeep. See, in my years of trying to get clean, I did have lots of help. I had loving friends and loving family. And in one of my bouts of getting clean, I had actually strung together about 90 days of sobriety. My very best friend in the world found me, helped me get clean. He said, if you can string 90 days together, we're gonna take this to the next level. I'm really gonna help you. Ended up enabling me, another story. But what he did at the end of that 90 days was he got me an apartment, he hooked me up with job interviews, bought me a computer. This is a good friend. He bought me a Jeep, right? Because I needed a Jeep to get from my apartment to my job, which I didn't quite have yet, but he was setting me up. He was pretty smart, though. He didn't put the Jeep in my name, because he knew that if I fell again, which I had done several times before, that he didn't want that Jeep in my name because he knew I would sell it, and I would use it for drugs, to do my absolute best to kill myself or escape. Well, I did fall. I wound up back on the street, and I couldn't sell the Jeep. But I could loan it out. So I did. So I loaned it out to a gang on the street in exchange for my DOC, my drugs of choice. And I thought, hey, this is a pretty good trade. I give them a Jeep. Every once in a while, they hook me up. Okay. I come out from behind my garbage can. That worked the first time. And the second time I showed up to say, hey, guys, I get the beating of a life. And then it became sport. And every time that any member of that gang or crew would see me, I was in for a beating. Several days after I'd gotten out of the hospital from a beating and severe concussions, I happened to see a Jeep. Don't ask me what possessed me to see if this key fit in that door. Because everything in the world said, do not try. But I was not of sound mind, so I tried. And it worked. And as luck would have it, the second that door opened, I heard a yell from down the street that said, "Hey!" And in that moment, I was crystal clear that I wouldn't live to the end of the day if that gentleman caught me. I got in the Jeep, I turned it on, and I drove. It just so happened to be that Jeep was on Hastings Street, if anybody's familiar with Vancouver. And the Jeep happened to be pointed east. And I just drove. I didn't know how close he was. I didn't know if he was chasing me. I didn't know if there was other people that were coming behind him, but I drove. I was in no condition to drive. The only good thing about driving in that situation was that I had adrenaline going. And that was important, because if the adrenaline wasn't going, I would have been coming down off a high and starting to go through withdrawal. I got just outside of Vancouver. I can't tell you the place, but it was a Safeway. I pulled into the parking lot. I was shaking. I got out of the Jeep. Now you need to imagine the scenario. I had a set of clothes on that I had been wearing for probably weeks. They were cut, bloody, dirty. Goodness knows what I smelled like. Probably hadn't eaten for a couple of days. I also had no teeth on the upper part of my mouth because I had knocked them all out during different seizures and overdoses. I had no money. I was in a Jeep that I couldn't prove was mine, and I had no identification. Much less, I didn't know if somebody was about to pull into that parking lot and kill me. Impossible is being here in front of you talking today. And if I would have thought at that moment, how am I going to repair my life? How am I going to get clean? How am I going to get my family back? How am I going to get out of bankruptcy? I could not have done it. I would have taken a drug and jammed it back in my arm and gone down the same path again. But in that moment, I had to have clarity, and I asked myself a question. Now, I didn't realize this is the question I asked, but inevitably the question I asked, what's most important to me about this situation? What is it about impossible that I really want to solve? And what I really wanted to solve is I just wanted to be safe. I just didn't want to die that day. It was probably the first time in years I realized I didn't want to die. At least not that way. And so I made the decision. I'm not going to die today. That was it. That's the only decision I had to make. And the next question I asked was, okay, how do I stay safe? And I didn't realize this was the question I asked until I analyzed it afterwards, but it's key to understand how we achieve impossible, because it's really three simple things. What's most important to me about this? And the second question is, what's the answer? And the answer was simply, I needed to get to my brother's place back in southern Alberta. It was a long way away. It was safe. He might take me in. He might not. I don't know. I had certainly done lots to deserve not to be taken back in. But at least he wouldn't kill me, which was maybe. His wife would have killed me for sure. But hopefully she wasn't home when I got there. So that's all I had to do. And the next question, what can I do right now? What can I do in this moment, this instant, to get closer to that? Not what are all the 500 things I need to do? What are not all the things that have to happen? Just what can I do right now? And the only answer I could come up with was I needed to ask for help. So I literally went around the parking lot asking for help. Believe me, you wouldn't have given it to me, and nobody did either. But in the process of elimination, I realized, because I'd been on the street and I'd learned how to beg a bit, I need to ask for something specific. It's really quite intriguing how clever homeless people can be. So I asked for something specific, and I knew better than to ask for money. I asked for a phone. I went around the parking lot asking for a phone. I said, look, I have somebody to call. I just need to ask somebody for help. Because my thinking was, well, if nobody here will help me, maybe somebody I know will help me, or maybe not, but I need to do something to stay safe. It was just the next thing. So somebody gave me a phone, made a bunch of phone calls, couldn't get a hold of anybody, got hung up, person had to leave, asked a bunch more people. 3 or 4 phones later, I finally got through to somebody that would take my call. That person was the former CFO of the company that I had built with him years ago. His name's Blair. Blair knew my shtick very well. I had called him several times telling him enormously ridiculous lies of how he needed to send me money and I needed to pay rent and often he would do it. But he, like everybody else in my life, was now on to me, and that shtick was up. He wasn't going for it. But Blair's a smart guy. He said, Cam, I'll do something for you. He says, where are you at? I said, I have no idea. I said, what's around you? And I told him there was a Safeway. He said, is there a Western Union in that Safeway? So at this point, had to give the phone back, had to ask a bunch of other people to get a phone, got another phone, went in, look, yes, there's a Western Union. I asked the lady, he said, ask the lady at Western Union what the store number is, blah, blah, blah. Did that. He said, got me back on the phone. He says, I'm going to send you $12.85. I was like, why $12.85? He's a very smart guy. He said, first of all, you need to know the exact number because there's no way that somebody's going to give you any money. You have no ID, you look like shit, you smell like shit, you're ugly, you're stupid, you're an idiot. Like, who's going to give you, like, so you need to know the exact amount of money, and I don't want to give you enough money to really get yourself in danger. Because even at that moment when he said he was going to send money, as an addict, I was thinking, if it's $50, you know, it's just how a mind works. So he said, I'm going to send you $12.85. What you do with it is up to you. But when that $12.85 runs out, if you're still alive, I'll help you again. Long story short, no ID, nothing. We convinced the lady that the wire came in, and she gave it to me, believe it or not, against every policy and rule there is out there. It took hours. Security guards were ushering me in and out. It was drama. I got the money. I filled up with a little bit of gas. I got some Insure. I don't know if anybody lived on that stuff. And I just started driving until I was low on gas again, and I really started looking for a Safeway. I got to a Safeway, and I did the same thing. It took me 10 days to get back to southern Alberta to my brother's place. It took me 10 days because lots of times I did run out of gas. And lots of times I woke up maybe a day later. And lots of times I was in the back of that Jeep puking my guts out and wondering what was next. And all I really cared about was I just need to be safe, and I just need to do the next thing. Impossible isn't about doing everything and figuring out how I would have the complete and total honor to be in front of you here today. It was only about doing something, and that something is just the next thing. The Nelson Mandelas of the world, the Mother Teresas of the world, they look back on their life, and I'm sure they didn't go, this is what I planned. I planned to do all these impossible things. They just did the next thing. They had something they cared about. They had something that they wanted to achieve. And sure, I'm sure they had lots of ideas and ways to get there, but what they did was just the next thing. When I listened to Rachel on the stage earlier today, and I thought about how she talked, that she just asked those 3 words, can you help us? I'm sure she wasn't thinking that, oh my gosh, I'm going to save a rainforest. She just did the next thing. She went home and she wrote a letter. I'm sure in that moment she wasn't thinking about, oh, I'm going to not follow through in my partnership law career and everything else. We can't think about, but that's when things become impossible. That's when impossible becomes real. Impossible doesn't stand a chance against just doing the next thing. We're going to hear from Sophie at the end of the talks today, and she's going to talk about how something as big as the refugee crisis, she didn't try to solve the whole refugee crisis. She just did the next thing. And the impact that she's had because she just did the next thing. So how the story actually unfolded was that it took me 10 days to get back to my brother's place. And when I got back to my brother's place, something amazing happened. He looked at me and he said, Cam, come on in. And my arms were around him and his wife, and they were literally carrying me into the house. And I said, Al, why are you going to help me this time? And he said, because you have 10 days clean. I hadn't had 10 days clean for years. I didn't think 10 days ago about staying clean for 10 days. I only thought about getting to my brother's place and just doing the next thing. That's how we accomplish impossible. Thank you.